there, before we start the video, we'd like to encourage you to follow us on Instagram.
As well as hitting the bell and subscribing to our YouTube channel.
Links are down below, and with that in mind, we hope you enjoy the video.
Today we are very excited to be joined by Julie Siddiqi, who's a mentor, consultant and an activist with a focus on gender issues, Jewish-Muslim relations and social action. Julie was the executive director of the Islamic Society of Britain from 2010 to 14, founder and director of Sadaqah Day, is co-chair of Jewish and Muslim Women's Network, Nisa Nashim. Julie was listed in the Times newspaper 100 most influential Muslim women in the UK in 2009. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Over the last 2 decades, you have done so much amazing work for interfaith dialogue, and more recently you've focused on Muslim and Jewish communities. What do you think this is so significant, especially today?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing I had realised doing the work that I'd been doing with different faith communities, I realised there was very little actually happening between Muslims and Jews. And one thing I had noticed was that whenever we were working together, everything was framed by what was happening in Israel. And of course, that is important. You know, the issues and the things that are happening over there are important to both communities. But I just felt that, you know, we're here, we're British, we're in the UK. What can we do? You know, much more about framing a narrative or working together with a focus on Britain rather than always focusing on what's happening miles away, important as that is. So that's really why. And I also feel that as Muslims coming to Britain as immigrants, largely mostly from the sort of 60s onwards, what can we learn from the Jewish community experience? And I realise that there's a lot we can learn and a lot of work that we can actually do together that's very positive. And so that's why I became interested probably about 8 or 9 years ago, and I've been working on it ever since, and it's been brilliant.
You co-chair Nisa Nashim, the Jewish-Muslim Women's Network. Can you tell us a bit about your work?
Yeah, so Nisa and Nashim, that's women in Hebrew and Arabic. That's why we chose the name. And I think one of the things that we realised was that, so I started working with what ended up being co-founder of Nisa Nashim, Laura Marks, and we became friends in sort of 2012 through some social action work that we were both doing, and realised that actually there's something very powerful about women working together. So I always say I love working with men as long as they're the right kind of men, but there's something very powerful about women and actually working not necessarily through institutions, for example, so not always thinking that any work, interfaith work, has to be done with the imam and the rabbi or the synagogue and the mosque, but actually much more about people socially connecting and working together. And we felt that there was something very powerful, and actually it's proven to be the case that actually women can do a lot of work together that's very, very effective when they don't feel that they need to be given permission by, you know, their religious leader necessarily. And we found it to be a very effective way of working. So we now have groups of Muslim and Jewish women all over the UK working together. Each group has to be co-chaired by a Jewish and a Muslim woman. And then we do work sort of nationally, so advocacy work, campaigning, working with government, and then we get our women to do social action projects together, political stuff if that's what they're interested in, maybe working through their local MP, those kind of things. There's a real variety of different work that we do, but it's very, very effective.
You have questioned the conventional methods of interfaith dialogue before. What do you think we can gain from deeper, more personal relations with people of other faiths?
Yeah, I mean, I feel, look, I always say that any interfaith work is good. You know, it's never wasted. But I felt that, you know, one of the things maybe that hasn't had as much emphasis is the friendship. So, you know, instead of just having meetings in a meeting room, talking about an issue, for example, and going home again, but actually bringing each other into each other's homes or bringing each other into our lives. So, you know, inviting to our weddings, to our bar mitzvahs, to our, you know, funerals of our parents or whatever. And actually, when you develop friendships, you really can start to care about the people in a different way, at a different level. And I have felt, so for example, when the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting happened, although it was in America, it was very much felt here as well. These connections are very strong. And I remember feeling that, the people in that synagogue could have easily been my friends. I've been in synagogues like that. I really felt genuinely upset. I cried because I felt they could have been my friends as well, people that I know very closely. And when the Christchurch mosque shooting happened, the first person to call me was Lindsay, my Jewish friend, on the school run to say, "Are you okay? How are you feeling?" And, she then had to listen to my anger and frustration and all of that. So I think, those friendships really mean a lot to me. And I think it's about trying to go deeper and developing those connections in a different sort of way that's beyond just a kind of meeting room, which is why I think that kind of work is important.
You are probably best known for initiating the Sadaqah Day. What is it and what inspired you to start it?
So Sadaqah means charity in Arabic, and often Muslims associate charity with giving money. And of course, it isn't just about giving money. Sadaqah is much broader than that. And I feel as part of our faith teachings that giving charity or service, being available to help others is really, really important. And it's part of the sort of DNA of the faith. Often Muslims associate charity with money, and a lot of that money goes abroad. So one of my main reasons for setting up Sadaqah Day was really about trying to get Muslims to see charity as beyond just money, and certainly beyond giving money abroad, about action and service and social action. And I saw the Jewish sort of equivalent, if you like, Mitzvah Day, which was very successful already, and realised that actually we could do something similar where you encourage people on one day to do social action, to do good work with others, to be Muslims showing our faith in action. So it's about doing something on one day with a view that people will continue to do it all year round, whether that be feeding the homeless, working with elderly people, getting young people involved to take a lead in social action activities. And it works because when you have something focused on one day, people feel, why is our mosque not doing this all year round? Why are we not focusing on this more often? And it just gives people the bug, really, to want to do it more. So it's worked really well. It's fairly small scale. I think there's a lot of potential for it to grow. But I think the mindset of Muslims at the moment is still very much about charity is money. So that mindset needs to shift. And something like Sadaqah Day, I think, can play an important role in that shift of mindset that we need.
Moving on to a slightly different point. A few years ago, you mentioned in an article that as a Muslim woman, you feel more vulnerable than ever. Could you tell us why?
Yeah, I think that, I don't remember the exact article, but I think it would have been about the times where you're feeling animosity or hostility towards Muslim women who have, if they wear a headscarf, are visibly Muslim. And so I think there's definitely been a rise in anti-Muslim hatred, and on-street anti-Muslim hatred often is targeted at women. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. One is because we're visibly, if we wear a headscarf, visibly Muslim. But also there's something around misogyny when it comes to focusing on women. Women, are seen as a target, in a way, an easy target for hatred. And so I think for me, I've said before that, I've felt more in the last few years uneasy, for example, on the underground, standing too near the edge of the platform, because you hear stories about people being pushed in. So, I don't spend my life, and I don't think we as Muslims should spend our life worrying and in too much fear. Actually, we're in some ways, as a Muslim woman, I feel I'm in one of the best countries in the world here. So I feel that as well. But I think that we just have to acknowledge that there are issues and prejudice and misunderstandings and misconceptions. So I think we have to name that and acknowledge it as a fear that people have, while also realising that we have to get out more, not less, not go inwards, not look inwards, not have a sort of victim mentality, because I think that can make it worse. If you have a victim mindset, then you're less creative, you're less bold, you're less likely to do things. You go inwards and start looking at your own community. So I think we need to be careful of that as well, while also acknowledging that these fears are very real.
What do you think is the biggest challenge for women in 2020, especially women of faith?
Yeah, I think, look, I'm an eternal optimist. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for women of faith to do much more together, not just Jewish and Muslim women, but women of all faiths. I think one of the things when people talk about more in common, and they say that as faith women, people of faith, we have a lot in common. We do have a lot in common in terms of the faith teachings, of course, but we also have a lot of stuff, a lot of issues, a lot of challenges when it comes to our faith and how that's practiced and how the texts are maybe misunderstood or how the texts are used against us as women. If you look at all of the different places of worship, there are issues around women and leadership and how women are seen and how women are perceived. And if you look at the churches, synagogues, mosques and others, there are lots of commonality there. And when I speak to women of faith, I think there's a lot there. So I think we actually can be a force for good. Actually, women in all communities are a force for good. But I think it's just about trying to connect the dots a bit now. And that, I think, is probably one of the most exciting things that I want to be involved in 2020.
One last question. I am very impressed of your decades-long work, despite many setbacks and often quite slow results. What keeps you motivated and how can we motivate ourselves?
So I think intentions are important. I think if you keep your intention sincere, doing things because you know they're the right thing to do, I think that helps. I think surrounding yourself with good people. So I'm very particular about who I work with. I don't like too much negativity. I think that, it's a sign of ingratitude to always be complaining and focusing on negative. So I make sure that I have good people around me. I try and stay focused on, one or two main things that get me excited. But, I am an optimist. I'm a glass half full type of a person. And I think we're so blessed, so lucky. And always, if you focus on the things to be grateful for, I think that really helps. And, not to expect things to happen straight away, that we're in the long game. If I think of myself as a Muslim in Britain, in some ways we've only just sort of come to this country. I mean, I was born here, I was brought up here, I wasn't Muslim when I was growing up. But, in terms of from a community perspective, there's still so much more that we have to do. So I think as long as I focus on things that I feel are important, then that, is easy for me to get up in the morning and feel excited and want to do more. And, in some ways, I think as I've got older, I feel even more enthusiastic about what I'm doing. And, you do see shifts, you do see changes in mindset, you do see things moving in the right direction. That is the kind of stuff I focus on. That's what keeps me going still after all these years.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe.